Record. Good evening, everyone. Jackie Hastings here, and I'm excited to go over chapters 11 and 12 in the Slight Edge with you. Chapter 11 is Mastering the Slight Edge. And so it was really funny. It started off talking about, kids learning to walk, and you didn't just pop out and start running. So you would start crawling, you would try to figure it out, you'd get the patterning down, you'd start to stand up, you'd start to cruise, you fall a lot, but you didn't stop, you still kept going. And one of the things that's different between us and kids learning how to walk is they don't give up like you, right? They're okay with the uncomfortable. They're okay with the falling. They keep going. They look around and people laugh at them, cry at them, but it doesn't deter them. They still keep going. So with us, a lot of times when we want to try something new, it's hard. We crawling and walking and all those things, and we're learning new habits, and often we'll get deterred when something doesn't quite go the way that we were planning, and we'll quit. So he talked about how successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. It is uncomfortable to get on a call at night. It is always comfortable to pick up the phone and call someone. Is it always comfortable when somebody says that they're not getting the results that they're wanting? And you have to ask those questions of, what does your routine look like? How are you doing towards your goals? What's your water intake like? What are you eating? Those things aren't always comfortable for us, but we know that's what we need to do to be successful. And if we don't, we fall off. And he talked about how it's really easy when we get a response, we to let it go the first time and say, well, that was really stinky and I failed. But then when you do it again and again, not going back to it and not trying, it becomes easier and easier. So that giving up is really hard the first time, but as you keep giving up more, it gets easier. And then we start to lose sight of where we're going. And then we start to fall into that 95% that falls down the down curve instead of up the up curve. So we kind of have to, embrace the hard or embrace the suck. And unfortunately, life isn't always fantastic. But if we have our eye on the goal, we can get there. You can step back onto that path of mastery anytime you want. That's a really cool thing. We can always start over. And then you talked about, have you ever wanted something so badly that hurts? And that want can be your dream, you desire something, or it can mean you lack something. So if you're lacking something, we want it. It's painful to not have it. So sometimes we'll talk about, be careful who you're sharing your dreams with, because all too often people are ready to rain on your parade because they get reminded of what they have lost or what they don't have as well. So if you're saying, hey, I've had this great opportunity, I'm earning these trips, I'm earning money, I'm helping people, I'm doing all these things, and you're telling somebody that and they wish they had it too, but aren't willing to do the work, and you're not firm in your belief, they are going to deter you. So be really careful about who you share your dreams with, because you don't want them to turn you down. And we talk about uncomfortable. The tension between where I am and where I want to be is uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, you can do one of two things. You can either move steadily closer to that end point, drawn by the magnet of your vision and pulled along by the future. But remembering that past can kind of pull you back down, or you can quit dreaming and make your end point or your point B disappear. Poof, gone. It becomes easy. And that's that easy that we talked about, and comfortable. And those are not where we want to be necessarily for the long term. Or, it's not always easy to be in that part now if we don't have good sight on our vision. So that's something to definitely think about. The other thing we talked about, and we talked about it last week, and it keeps coming up in so many different things. Even I'm teaching a personal finance course, and it's coming up in there, and it's so crazy how all of this intertwines. And They actually talked about Jim Ron in here, which I didn't read this stuff or listen to the Eric Worre call before I did my call on Monday. And I pulled that quote out of there. And then all of a sudden he's showing up in all this stuff. So, sometimes look for those little God whispers if you're doing the right thing once in a while. But the success curve and that failure curve, they run along, parallel to each other for a really, really, really long time. And sometimes they don't look a whole lot different than each other than the actions that you're doing in those time periods. But all of a sudden, as you continue those actions, they veer away from each other. So that's something to think about. Is it can look really similar in the beginning. Um, on the other side of that failure curve, or on the other side of those parallels, is your action. And we really have to look at that. And you have to think about, are you willing to give up some of the comfortable now for the uncomfortable later? Which goes back to Dave Ramsey, who says, if you will live like no other, later you can live like no one else. You have to embrace the uncomfortable to attain a life that is genuinely comfortable, but not deceptively comfortable. So those are some things that I think are really important to keep in mind. Um, and stop being convinced by others, right? He talked about the whole thing about funerals, and in a funeral, most of the funerals are really small. Only about 10 people cry at them, and the weather's the biggest determination of whether people actually go to the gravesite for the burial. But if you have a gigantic funeral, people that go to those, or the people that those funerals are for, are people who who did a whole lot of really, really good things with their lives, and they didn't worry about what other people thought. So that's kind of, yeah, I thought it was really sad too, Steve. That's the ripple effect. So if you're changing a lot of lives and you're doing a lot of really good things, it carries through, not just for this time, not through those uncomfortable times, but to the end time too, through your death, through the rest of it. So definitely something to think about as well. And then it was funny because the readings in church today talked about that a little bit too. We have to be willing to give up a little bit of comforts to have that eternal reward as well. So it all parallels. And then we go into chapter 12, where you invest in yourself. And this is one that I see a lot of people kind of get hung up on. The greatest gift you could ever give yourself is also the wisest business investment you could ever make. Your own personal development. And around a little bit, you've probably heard Fallon say that she got stuck and she wasn't doing all these things. And she was asking her sponsor, Lori Welsh, well, what do I need to do? And she's like, you need to go read these books. And she's like, yeah, and so she didn't have the huge successes she had until she started pouring more into herself. And we're kind of the same. We have to pour into ourselves and have that personal development, but it's not enough just to read the books and do the webinars and do those things if you're not going to implement what you're learning. So people spend time accumulating knowledge, but moving onto the success curve requires doing. You have to do the thing, and you otherwise you're not going to have the results that you want. So he talked about the study and then doing an activity, and then you get an idea of how you did, you go back, you adjust, you change, you study, you adjust, study, do, adjust. And we have to keep having those course corrections. And one of the things he talked about, is when you're driving, a lot of times you get an autopilot and you don't realize as you're driving down the road how much you're adjusting that wheel all the time. And if you held your wheel clenched and you didn't move your arms and you didn't do those adjustments, pretty soon you'd be off the road, even though the road seemed like it was pretty straight and narrow. And even though where we think narrow, we have to continue to have those course adjustments. We have to be able to look and see what we're doing and be willing to make those little changes in order to have more improvement. But if we haven't done the personal growth, we don't necessarily see where we need to make those adjustments. If we don't ask for help and reflect on those things, if we're not willing to be coachable, we're going to miss those adjustments, and soon we're off in the woods, off the road, and a lot of times we've got people in the car with us and we take those people with us, and those people, so you have to be really careful that you don't do that as well, that you're adjusting and you're teaching your people how to grow and adjust as well. So um, it's not how you plan your work, it's how you work your plan. And the slight edge means that you're doing both. So you're doing all of those things. What you think times action plus time equals what you get. Um, through the power of your own thoughts are the power of your own thoughts are the most, because you are the most influential person in your life. Oh my goodness. One of those days. So, if you tell yourself constantly, you're stupid, you're dumb, you can't do these things, I'm not great at this, I can't reach out to people, I'm not a people person, nobody's going to listen to me, you're right. You are absolutely right, because you have already set yourself up for failure. But if you say, you know what? I'm reading these books, I'm learning, I'm doing these great things, I have the ability to help others, project what you want to be, project what you're doing, and don't just say, I'm trying. Trying is not enough. You have to do. So make sure you're not on autopilot, make sure you're asking for help, make sure you're continuing to grow. And that's where you're going to see the most fruit of your labor. I liked how he said how to get off of autopilot and determining choices and decisions that your subconscious makes for you to carve your life path with your conscious mind, and repeat it over and over until that task is handed off to your subconscious. Sometimes we'll say we don't like doing something, but keep telling ourselves that we do, until it becomes an action. Um, it really makes a big difference. I mean, how often do we go somewhere or we're doing our IPA and we're not really putting any thought process to it? Or how much, do we sit on these calls and not say a word and we're just kind of nodding our head maybe periodically, but we're actually scrolling on our phone or we're doing something else and we're not really putting the time and energy into these things. So if you're going to do these things, you might as well get the most out of them. Start making it a conscious effort. And soon, as you start to do those things, it will become part of your subconscious. It won't be as difficult, and you'll see the fruits of your labor. So, those are some of the things that I picked out of chapter 11 and 12. I would love, love, love to hear some of the things you guys picked, and how you're going to find them, or what changes you can see yourself making based on what you read in these chapters.
So one thing that really stood out to me that I could really relate is in chapter 11, that the space between where you are and where you want to be, that uncomfortable place, because it is hard. Like, I've been there, I am there, I've been there for a while. Like, this is, I'm here, I'm at Senior Ruby, I want to get to Emerald, I want to eventually get to Diamond, and this in between phase, right? Like, this is hard, this is not comfortable, and you look at what you need to do, you're constantly self-evaluating. It would be easy to give up, right? It would be easy to be like, well, you know what, that's too far out of my reach, I'm just going to sit in my comfort, right? And this is cozy. That's too easy, but that's not what I want. That's not what my heart desires. That's not where I want to go. That's, going to limit me being a blessing to other people and helping them grow. So keeping your eye on the target, keeping your focus forward, reminding yourself multiple times a day, every minute if you have to, like where you're headed and the bigger vision. And that's so important. And that's going to help get you through that uncomfortableness and that hard, that in between. So if you guys are silver, if you're gold, if you're senior gold, just know, like, it's keep that vision in sight, keep it going forward. It is uncomfortable, but that's where the growth happens.
So good. Those are so many good points, Rochelle. And oops, got those are some really good points. And it kind of goes not just with this, but some of the other things that I was learning and training too, about where they were talking about, especially for somebody who's a red personality color, For somebody who's a red personality color, those are people who are like super driven for growth and that kind of thing. And they'll come out of the gate running fast, hard, hitting huge goals as they go through their warm market and all of those things. And then all of a sudden, and that's actually really easy for them. And they see those goals and those instant rewards and like, yeah, yeah, I got this made. But then when they have to start doing a little bit more work and they have to start making those personnel, or, making those personal connections and digging deeper and doing more of those things, it's not so easy anymore. And then you go back and go, oh, crud, I didn't make those connections. And some of those people fall off. And that is oftentimes where we'll see people fall off because they're like, oh, shoot, I don't know what I was supposed to be doing, and go back and they have to reevaluate. And that's really, really, really common. So making sure that if you're one of those people, especially, that you're remembering your why, you're keeping focused, you're remembering that that was the easy part, and that's okay. But you can go back, you can do the hard part that a lot of us have had to do from the very beginning, right? And dig and dig, and soon enough, it will start to come to fruition.
I'm going to step back even a little bit further before what Rochelle said, because the one thing that struck me so hard in actually both of these chapters is it's on, I'm just going to read it. It's on page 161, and it's all infants are successful. As infants, we're all masters. That's just the way we're designed. God made us to be masters. And it's only when we let everything else tear us down and move us away from being a master. And so for me, that's incredibly empowering, that like God made me this way, and I have to overcome the outside forces that I've allowed to move me away from being a master, and just sort of reclaim. I'm not trying to become something that I'm not supposed to be. I just need to reclaim it. So that's all I've got for tonight.
I love that. We weren't destined for failure. We were destined for greatness. And why we forget about that is because we're human, and
Mhm.
because we don't like the uncomfortable. The gospel reading today even talked about how it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And if we think about that just in the terms of what we're looking for in this life, if we're looking for easy, the great rewards, whether it be business or the eternal life or whatever we're looking at as our great reward, and to make that big impact, it's really daggone hard if it's comfortable. Um,
Mhm.
so we definitely have to keep those things in mind, but remember, it's okay. We're not set up to fail.
Amen.
And I think, Rochelle, you put in the comments, the world can get in the way of our potential. It's not as much the world as ourselves. Um, I am my own worst enemy. There is nobody or no thing in this world that can deter me from anything any more than I can do myself. So I have to keep that in mind. And that's where, chapter 11 and 12, we're talking about that slight edge for mastery. But chapter 12, we're also talking about how we have to use that action. So we can't rest on our laurels, because the negative Nellies of ourselves have a tendency to destroy us. So we have to do that personal growth. We have to do that action. We have to connect with positive people. We have to do those things to help combat um, the negativity of ourselves. Yes. And yes, all the times we hear yeses versus nos. Absolutely. And they talked about the only difference between a diamond and, somebody of a lower rank is the number of no's you've heard. I can tell you, I've heard a lot of no's. If you're not hearing no's, you're not asking enough people. So keep on going. Alrighty. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? I know there was a lot in these chapters, but it's so good. I mean, I took so many notes, and I know my presentation to y'all might have been a little scattered, but I was trying to not read all of my notes and make you go crazy because you read the book already.
So I'll just jump in and say that investing in yourself, you can't go wrong. And sometimes you don't see the immediate results as we're reading these books. And if you're listening to podcasts, just keep going. I mean, eventually you're going to see those results and they'll pay off. And it might be in unexpected ways. I think I've said that before on some of these book clubs, but just you can't go wrong. Just keep going and find things that challenge your thinking. Different podcasts, maybe even reach up to your upline and say, hey, what are you listening to these days? But yeah, just keep going, folks.
100%. I mean, it's weird. You read these books and then you run into weird situations that aren't even necessarily plexus related, and you can pull something out from it and it really helps you get through, or you have some great things to share with other people to help them through something. There's amazing things with it. It's helped with, work stuff, with parenting stuff, with friend stuff, with marital stuff, with, just so many things that we might not even realize in the moment. So I love that. Great point, Steve. All righty. Yes. And learn by doing, get conversations going. And the only way we learn is by asking and doing. And sometimes even just putting in some of the screenshots of some of those conversations into your chat with your upline so they can help you out. Learn and grow. We do that all the time. I've learned and grown and got a lot of ideas, from chats that I've had, not just with my upline, but even some of my downline, because we all have different personality styles. I mean, Lauren has had some wonderful ways of saying things, same with Rochelle. Um, I love to get ideas of saying things from other people as well, and we learn and grow together. So that's definitely helpful. Alrighty, all kind of quiet tonight, but that's okay. Keep reading, doing, and growing. We're going to, there is a book club next week, but we're getting close to the end of this book. We're going to be talking about our next book really soon, and we will see you all next week. Thank you, everyone.